we appreciate your patience with us. But welcome everybody to this first webinar on the Transparency Programme pilot that we're having. So this is the first opportunity for us to tell you a little bit more about it and for some questions later on in the presentation. So my name is Anna Lang. I'm Associate Director for Research Funding here at Research England. I work alongside a JobShare partner, Alex Herbert-Guest, and I'll be passing on to the team who've been doing a lot of the work to ensure this pilot is ready for you. So to tell you a little bit more about it, so the reason that we're undertaking this work is partly as a result, or at least in alignment with the published NERSE review back in 2023, which talked about the need for greater transparency across the sector of the use of funding. Related to that, I think one of the key benefits of QR and strategic institutional research funding at large is the unhypothecated nature of it, the flexible way that you can use it as you best see fit to suit your strategic purposes. Now, alongside that positive, from your point of view, that does bring challenges in terms of our ability to evidence the benefits that it provides to universities and have a clear understanding of exactly how it's used and how it's contributing to your strategic research priorities within your university. Hence some of the recommendations in the NERSE review and our wider desire to better understand the kinds of decisions you're making and how you're using your SURF funding. So we're often asked by government, by Treasury, and also within colleagues more widely across research councils and UKRI about how this funding is used by universities and the benefits it has. Hence the culmination into this pilot programme for the transparency review. So we do fully recognise this is a pilot. It is intended to be experimental. We understand that it has been, rolled out and rolled out to the sector relatively rapidly, and this is our first attempt to try and capture this category-based information on how you use your funding. It's not going to be perfect. We recognise that, and we really want to work with you as a community to understand what the kind of evidence that we can get along the way. So as part of that, there is an opportunity for you to complete an expression of interest, to be involved in a kind of real-time review, which will sit alongside this pilot year. The deadline for applications for that, or to at least inform us of your expression of interest, is the 31st of October. So with that in mind, do let the team know if you'd like to contribute to that. And that is in a real effort to gather information about how able institutions are to complete the pilot and ways in which we can improve it as we go along. I'll pass over to Aga, who's going to give a presentation which goes into a little bit more detail in terms of how the pilot will run and what it's for. There will be a Q&A box, I believe, where you have an opportunity to submit your queries by that, and there's an upvote option for that along the way too. So I will turn my camera off and hand over to Aga for the rest of the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Anna, and once again, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Aga. I'm one of the senior policy advisors working with Anna on the transparency activity, and we're going to have about 15-minute long, 20-minute long presentation, and then the rest of the time in today's webinar is dedicated to Q&A. So if you do have any questions as I talk, please feel free, like Anna said, to put them in the Q&A box. Depending on the size of your screen, you might need to click the three dots in the top right corner under More, and that's where the Q&A option is hidden for smaller screens. So without further ado, we've organised a series of webinars to increase your understanding of the rationale behind this pilot exercise and how the gathered information will be used by Research England to help you learn a little bit where to find the submission template and how to navigate it, or what types of questions are there. Also to give you the chance to ask questions about the process. And last but not least, to give you an opportunity to connect and sort of see if you'd like to undertake any peer supports, which is why at the point of registering for the webinar, we've given you an option to decide whether you'd like for your name and your email address to be shared with everyone else in the room, because we don't have time for breakout rooms, we don't have time for conversations within this hour, but I'm sure you can find time for those conversations at your own time. A little bit by means of context about the Transparency Programme as a whole. So this is a new programme of activity for Research England, and it aims to enhance the transparency of how strategic institutional research funding, or SURF, is used by higher education providers. and to provide evidence on how it underpins research activity in a wide range of ways. So whenever we say transparency in this context, it's just that. It's the evidence and awareness that Research England has of how you are using formula-based funding or strategic institutional research funding. And what SURF actually is, I'm conscious that maybe not all of you are already using this terminology, but I imagine all of you know of quality-related research funds. And so SURF is essentially an umbrella term, as you can see on the slide, for all types of QR funding that we have, as well as for ring-fenced funds that are dedicated for more specific purposes, but they're still flexible. So within that, we've got the specialist provider element, the policy support fund, the participatory research fund, and the enhancing research culture fund. As you will see on the slide, RCIF, or Research Capital Infrastructure Funding, is also part of strategic institutional research funding. However, it is not part of the transparency program because we have a separate strand of activity and we're gathering evidence about it separately through the code survey, condition of the estate survey. Some of you might have seen some comps as well that we are undertaking a review of all the SURF funding at the moment in parallel to the transparency program. And this is a rather long-term activity. It's scheduled until 2030, but it's important to highlight that they happen in conjunction and inform each other. And if you'd like to find out more about this, there's a link at the bottom of the slide to a page about the SURF review. In terms of the transparency program itself, it's got two phases to it. And the first one is focusing on how is SURF funding being used on the ground at your universities? And simultaneously, we also have started scoping how to gather evidence about strategic approaches to SURF. So this is phase 2 of the transparency program. Timing-wise, some of you or maybe your colleagues at your universities have taken part in our community testing. So thank you so much to everyone who did participate. That was done through roundtables or focus groups in April and May 2025. And thanks to the feedback, very honest, critical, constructive feedback that we've received from you at those focus groups, we are able to improve the template and guidance that we are now using in this pilot exercise. So the pilot exercise has launched thanks to your input from the community testing. And the second kind of longer term part of the program, phase 2, will be developed in the future. So why are we doing this and why now? You might be wondering, especially considering the very challenging situation of the higher education sector in England and indeed in the whole of the United Kingdom is finding itself at the moment. This rationale on the slide is actually not just for the pilot exercise, but for the entire program. And essentially, I'm just reiterating what Anna said at the start. We're doing this to improve our understanding of how SURF funding is used by providers. We're doing it because we've pledged to do it in our 2022 to 25 Research England Strategic Delivery Plan. Also because that way we help to address one of the recommendations from the independent NERS review of the research and innovation landscape. And obviously because this will give us evidence valuable in making the case for continued investment. What do we hope you might get from participating in the pilot exercise? And I'm highlighting that because the pilot is a voluntary activity, so your institutions are not obliged, but they're strongly encouraged to take part. Hopefully, the pilot will offer you a chance to test your internal ways of gathering information, your university systems, and the online submission form that we've created. But first and foremost, it is to give you a chance to co-shape this new annual monitoring process before it will be rolled out across the sector, which we plan to do in 26-27. This is subject to review, the timing. But yes, we very much want to see how you get along and hear how that experience has been for you, for your types of institutions across England. And why do we need pilot data? To design a proportionate annual process for the full rollout. So this has not been done on that scale. So we appreciate this is an unprecedented kind of sector-wide activity, sector-wide exercise. So we really want to make sure that it's doable and proportionate. We very much want to showcase how SURF enables research excellence and innovation, and to strengthen our case to government for SURF funding. That's what we need pilot data for. And it will be obviously part of wider UKRI effort to improve insights and evidence about UKRI research funding across the entire organisation. So a few important things about the pilot exercise itself. The pilot year is academic year 2025-26. We've launched this exercise at the start of September, and the deadline for pilot submissions is the 1st of June 2026. So I appreciate June is not the last month of the academic year, which is why for July and August, it's sufficient if you just indicate a prognosis of your SURF users to us, of how you're planning on using the spend. So just kind of rough estimate will be sufficient for the purpose of the pilot exercise. Secondly, I would like to highlight the inclusive approach. So all higher education providers in England in receipt of SURF are invited to take part in this pilot, and the more of you take part, the better the process will become as a result, because you'll tell us how it's working on the ground and what needs to be tweaked to make it better. Which is why we're going to undertake a two-strand or two communications channel real-time review. Hopefully in early 2026, perhaps even before Christmas, we will launch a feedback survey for all universities taking part in the pilot. That will be an online survey that you can decide to fill in. It's optional. And a second optional way of letting us know what's working and what's not working in the pilot template and in the pilot process is semi-structured interviews, so one-to-one conversations that we plan to undertake in 2026 towards the end of the pilot with a smaller group of providers. We have EDI compliant selection criteria for this, but it's voluntary, like the whole pilot is voluntary. And to highlight that you do have capacity and willingness and time to take part in a semi-structured interview, please fill in an expression of interest or EOI form, which you can access online through Research England data portal. So the same way that you can access also your pilot submission form. To avoid misunderstanding, I'd like to clarify a couple of key features of this pilot. This is an evidence gathering exercise. So we're interested in qualitative and quantitative evidence, but it is not an accountability exercise. It is not a financial assurance exercise. We just want good examples of what SURF is enabling you to do in research space. The pilot is designed to introduce a cyclical process intended to strengthen the case for SURF funding, but it is not intended to impact your future allocations. Once again, the pilot is not intended to impact future allocations. And participation, like I said, is very much encouraged, but it is voluntary. So therefore, if you feel like collaboratively consulting your colleagues and that your institution actually doesn't have the time, doesn't have the resources to take part in the pilot, we would really appreciate if you could just email us with a short message by the end of October at researchpolicy@re.ukri.org, so the email address that you can see at the bottom of the slide, because that will then enable us to consider representativeness of the pilot. In terms of using the form for your pilot return, this is accessible through the Research England data portal. So each university should have at least 2 individuals that are admin users of the portal. They can give access to further colleagues to complete the form. And on the portal, as you can see on the slide, there's a specific data collection for the Transparency Programme Phase 1 evidence gathering. And within that, you can find what we call data release for 24-25 pilot exercise. So yeah, this is the way to navigate the form. One important thing to also highlight is that once you have accessed the form, you can save work in progress answers as well, and then come back through to it later in the year. So the template we're using for the pilot has been developed in a collaborative, very much iterative way as well. So we hosted, as I've mentioned, 3 roundtables of focus groups, and participants have seen a previous version of that template and really helped us to rebuild it and improve it. So once again, thank you so much to those of you who took part. It is very light touch because we're conscious of your workload and we wanted to minimize administrative burden. And we gather evidence of how SURF, or Strategic Institutional Research Funding, is being used year on year in the form of aggregated percentages. And also we are asking you for some narrative examples of how you use specific SURF streams. The template is an experimental tool. It's set up on a platform called monday.com, and this is the kind of welcome page of how it looks. You can scroll through all the questions once you're there, and like I said, do remember that you can save a work in progress return and come back to complete it later. A few things to highlight in terms of methodology. I imagine that some of you would have already looked at the template and are aware of that, but I just thought it would be important to highlight that for everyone's benefit. So we've got questions that are asking for qualitative answers that have a character limit of 2,000 characters, which roughly means about 300 to 400 words. So just please be mindful of that, because you won't be able to save longer answers. And then questions from 2 to 11 require quantitative data or percentages of, there's a selection of categories of what SURF funding can be spent on, and we just ask you to give us an estimate of how much of your total SURF pot has been used in this academic year for those particular purposes. And those questions come with or without a cap at 100%. Because we would like to take the opportunity of this pilot to trial 2 methodologies of capturing aggregated spend. So please do take notice of whether your university has been assigned to what we call subgroup A or subgroup B. This was randomized, so it's not a reflection of the size of allocations or anything else. It's diverse and it's randomized, and it should have been highlighted in the circular letter that your Vice Chancellor received, as well as in your online form that you can access through the data portal. In any kind of, one last bullet on the slide, in any kind of narrative responses, if you do know of any impacts of the funding that have already been identified, please do also highlight these, because they really help to strengthen the case. What will happen with your pilot data? We will publish aggregated and anonymized findings, so you will see something tangible out of that pilot online, probably towards the end of the summer next year. And this is to be transparent about the transparency pilot, and also to champion how SURF provides you with stability and flexibility addressing your research needs. Your feedback from real-time review will help us to improve the monitoring process before the planned rolled out, which, like I said, is planned for 26 to 27. We will also use the insights from the pilot and from its real-time review to inform the second phase of the transparency program to avoid duplication, excessive burden, and to inform its alignment with the government's vision for higher education. So just a recap of important dates. The end of this month, so 31st of October 25, is the deadline by which you can let us know that you are taking part in the pilot, and even more than that, you would like to take part in the real-time review interviews and find a date in the diary to speak to us. But also, if your institution is not participating, please do let us know by the end of the month. There's no consequences of that. It's just for our own understanding of diversity of pilot participants. in terms of institution types and location. The next important date, 1st of June 26, this is a submission deadline, and then implementation, hopefully in the following year. In terms of community of practice, we very much hope that you might want to create such a community in the sort of grassroots way. So when you were registering for the webinar, we gave you an option to include your name, job title, institution name, and email address, and let us know if you would like for this to be shared with other participants and if you'd like to receive a list of other participants' details as well. Obviously, your personal data is protected in line with UKRI data protection policy. And once those messages are sent and you have the list, we do encourage you to reach out to one another for support on the pilot journey. There's 2 more webinars as a further chance to connect on the 5th of November and then 15th of January 2026. The presentation will be the same, but obviously the community of participants might be different. So if this is why I'm highlighting it, this aspect of the pilot right now. A wealth of resources has been created for you already, which you would have already seen. So we've got a circular letter, guidance, and template in a PDF format or rather HTML accessible format online. And there's also the equality impact assessment for the whole transparency program. We also might create a frequently asked questions document once the webinars have all taken place. And also you can reach out to us directly. This is the email address to use with any specific queries. We'll try to respond within 5 working days, considering obviously things such as the Christmas break that might be slightly longer response time, but we're definitely here to support you going through the pilot exercise. And that's all I wanted to say. Let's just move to the Q&A session now. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. And I'm going to have a look at the Q&A box, but there was one pre-submitted question which I should really begin with. So that question submitted in advance at the point of registration was, what is the time frame for release of reporting requirements / templates and submission of pilot reporting? So once again, just to reiterate, the pilot has started on the 9th of September, which is when universities received the circular letter and were given access to the template on the data portal, as well as a standalone copy of the guidance. And the deadline is the 1st of June. One of you has then asked whether the slides will be emailed out post this session. Yes, we have also recorded or started recording. So we plan to publish the recording as well to enable anyone who was not able to be with us here today to watch it at their own time. So I'm just going to mark that as answered. And let's have a look at further questions. So another colleague has asked, can I check if the academic year is being used as the census period? Because funding is allocated from the 1st of August till the 31st of July. So Anna, I can see you've answered that in the box. Do you want to read the answer out in case some participants have not known?
I can do. Yeah, I can do. Yeah, I think in your presentation, Aga, you referred to the deadline for submissions being the end of June, and so that they would need to do some forecasting for their potential submissions for later, but that would only be necessary up until the end of July, because we have from the 1st of August in the previous year until the end of the July. So there's only 1 month in theory, but I think for me that June deadline helps send a signal about how far that this isn't supposed to be perfect. We're not expecting you to be able to answer us in a kind of in a finite level of detail month by month, but it sends that right signal. But yes, it should be in theory up until the end of that July, as per the funding allocation period.
Indeed. So there's 2 months, but it's going to be June and July where we expect prognosis of some sort to be included. I can't see any questions at the moment that have had more than one vote, so I'm going to go through them in a sort of chronological order as they appear. Someone reported that the university couldn't access the data portal, and the administrator at that institution has left. So how can that problem be solved at our end?
So I'm happy to pick this one up, Agate. It will also answer the second question down on the list as well. But basically, if you've got any issues accessing the data portal, if you drop us an email at our research policy inbox, as Agate outlined on the slide, we'll be able to hand you over to the right people to make sure you get access. So yeah, just drop us a line to our inbox and we can sort that for you.
Thank you. And yeah, staff changes are not uncommon. So each institution should have 2 admin users. If it so happened that those 2 individuals have left, then yeah, the best thing is to get in touch with us directly, and we'll grant access to someone who took on the role. And then we've got a question about the quantitative side of this exercise, as the categories are for the purposes of the exercise only. How binding are they? So how binding are the categories of research activity that we're using in the template?
Yeah, so they are necessarily quite broad brush. We don't necessarily expect them to capture perfectly the minutiae of how research works at individual institutions, but they are deliberately therefore quite broad buckets. So hopefully most of your research does fit within them. The way that the template is laid out means you do need to ascribe percentages, but you can ascribe a 0% to something if you don't have activity in that area. There is also then an option, and we will be collecting this through kind of the feedback we get as well, for you to tell us that there is other, and that there should be other categories on there, or some of the categories don't make sense. It's also one of the reasons that we're testing these 2 methodologies, because we are aware that the buckets are quite broad. Some institutions may say this particular activity fell in 2 of those, so it might be useful to record more than 100% effectively. So that's why we're testing this both ways. So yes, do try to work within them insofar as the template lays them out, but we are acknowledging how broad they are, and there is obviously this opportunity to feed back to us for future refinement of them.
Thank you so much, Helen. And also one more thing to note on that subject is that if you look at the guidance for the pilot exercise, there is a selection of examples of things that might fall into each of those categories given there to sort of aid your efforts. It's by no means an extensive list, but it's just for a flavour essentially, or to show what types of things can be put into each category. We've got a question now at the top from anonymously submitted question. Someone feels uncertain about providing feedback during the year, with the deadline of submission being the 1st of June. Is the expectation that we complete the template on an ongoing basis during the year?
That is entirely up to you. Different institutions are going to approach this differently, and that is completely fine. You may find it easier to input as you go. You may find it easier to do it all in one go at the end. We'll have that survey open for you to provide feedback over a long period of time, so before the reporting deadline, but also subsequent to the reporting deadline, so that you can familiarise yourself with what we're asking, fill it in as you go, or leave it to the end. We recognise that different institutions do work differently, so just trying to capture that and allow you to kind of schedule it as best suits you. So entirely as suits you.
And I think we recognise that different institutions will have different structures that exist already in terms of how they categorise their spend or how they record their spend. So, you know, I would recommend not leaving it till June to have a look in terms of how you might, you know, whether you're choosing to kind of collect the data periodically, or we're not asking for you to submit it periodically at all. We won't expect to return until after that June deadline. But I think in terms of how you're structured and how you're able to categorise your spend and identify those categories, we recognise that you will have views, and hopefully some will be able to feed back through that period, hence the kind of the parallel nature of it. It's also with a view for us to be in a position to launch the next iteration for 26-27 in good time, and should we collect all of your kind of the review of that after the exercise, we wouldn't expect to be in a position to do that.
Indeed, and the same goes for the timings of the real-time review, semi-structured interviews. We plan to have some of those conversations kind of quite a few months before the deadline, I think, to get the sort of initial feel. and then organize most of them maybe during July time. Depends on obviously individual availability at specific providers and EDI aspects of summer holidays approaching and leave, etc. So yeah, the survey will be open for a generous amount of time, and the interviews will also be sort of spread across time in that way. We've got one specific question here from a colleague called Chris about question 3 in the survey, or in the pilot submission form. So question 3 suggests we should use the FEC or full economic cost values and calculate the gap between 100% for economic cost and project funding. Is that correct? And should we also use FEC values where there is a project with no external funder? For example, when a university uses their internal ECR research funds, or I suppose that's going to be early career research or enhancing research culture, one of the two.
Yeah, that's a good question. So yeah, for question 3, we are asking you to kind of estimate then what that gap between the full economic cost and the funded cost was. So exactly as you said, Chris, and then just kind of aggregating that to a percentage of your total SURF where possible. And it should just cover in question 3 things that were funded by other funders, so not things that are entirely institutionally funded.
Thank you, Helena. We've got a question from Jessica about the full rollout. Can I check when the final version for academic year 2026-27 will be available? I assume it's the final version of the template and process.
We haven't committed to a date yet. I think watch this space. We appreciate that the earlier we provide guidance, the easier it will be to complete. You know, this is a genuine pilot, and we do want to gather your views and see how possible it is to complete it. If we find that it's relatively straightforward, we'd be in a position to roll out that final version earlier. But I think, yeah, we will be working on it as soon as we're able to, and through the year as a result of doing this real-time review. But we haven't committed to a date at this point, but recognise that there will be multiple calls for sooner rather than later. So we do appreciate that, but I would anticipate it being within the first quarter of that academic year. So I think it will be sometime between September and December 2026, but that's not something that we have confirmed at this stage.
Thank you so much, Anna. Indeed, we just need a time to take on board all your insightful feedback and then improve the process in line with that. And yeah, it depends on the number of institutions participating in the voluntary pilot. That might take a little while to give you justice. Couple of further questions that are anonymous. How indicative is the pilot survey for the future mandatory annual monitoring? I guess that means the shape and the kind of type of questions we're asking.
I mean, we're hopeful that it is indicative. I mean, I think that's the watch this space. This is certainly the kind of the approach we would like to take. There is certainly value in having both quantitative and qualitative data within that. We are certainly pushed to provide more quantitative, hence the categories that we have. I think in the past we have tended to try and capture more case study type examples of the way that you use our funding, but we are being challenged further and further on having to provide more quantitative data. So I think in terms of that format, that structure is likely to continue. But I think it certainly depends how far these broad categories are some that you can identify with, how far that they're offering valuable information as to how far it is indicative. If we find that it really isn't, the current approach, has lots of challenging feedback that obviously we would have to reconsider considerably how far we would be able to roll out a mandatory exercise for 26-27. So it certainly isn't all agreed, and hence holding a pilot for this year.
Thank you, Anna. There's a question from Emma, who received 3 votes from other participants as well. So let's go to this one next. The benefits and impacts of SURF might take a number of years to fully materialize. Absolutely correct, just like with any research impacts. And Emma is asking, is there any plan to take a longer term view of the value of SURF rather than just reporting on in-year allocations?
Yeah, I can take this one as well. So Aga mentioned our kind of wider review of our strategic institutional research funding that we're currently undertaking in parallel to this transparency pilot. So we have at the moment been working with an independent consultant to try and gather evidence on the value of our funding and the role it plays within institutions at that kind of impact and benefit level. That has been a sample exercise with 25 English institutions across the breadth of the sector, with multiple interviews within each of those universities, hence targeting it in the way we have, with a view to provide better independent evidence on that impact and value of the role of our funding within institutions. So that we're hoping we should be able to publish a report on that in the next period. So hopefully within the next 6 months or so, that will be available. And as we continue to look at the kind of the wider SURF review in parallel to this, that independent report will help us in that way. There is also an intention as part of the wider transparency pilot to consider whether we also seek more of a strategic statement from institutions periodically, so not on an annual basis, to help us understand the kind of decisions making and the way in which you plan to use your funding in the future. But that's certainly in early days, and further guidance would be provided at a point we're able to do that. I think the important thing is this is intended as part of a package, and thinking carefully about the burden that we place on institutions to support us with that.
Indeed, thank you so much, Anna. And yes, the sort of second strand is what I've referred to on one of the earlier slides. It is much more long-term than the exercise in harvesting annual evidence. We've got 2 further questions that both received 2 votes each. So in terms of which one was submitted first, we've got, can you assure us that the data submitted for this year will only be used to inform the pilot and not for any other purposes by Research England?
I think it depends what we mean by other purposes. We certainly don't intend to interrogate individual institutions in a way that would inform other purposes. If we're able to make kind of to do analysis that tells us that certain categories of spend are common across the sector, I think that will be useful in our discussions with Treasury and government and wider UKRI. So as far as that informs our understanding of the nature of our funding and the way it's used at a sector level, I think we would seek to do that, understanding that this was intended as pilot information and can only be so robust as a result. But it certainly wouldn't be used at a kind of granular individual institution level. But if we do feel that it's able to support wider evidence, then we would consider how we use that at a sector level.
Thank you. That's it. It's not individual, it's not scrutinizing individual institutions, and it's also not gathered to inform allocations. This is pilot data, initial kind of glimpse of what SURF is doing in a sort of space of a year, and strengthening evidence and letting us know what we need to redesign in the form and in the guidance for the full rollout are the reasons why we're doing that. And on that note, the next question is, given that this is a pilot year, does it matter if we don't have the capacity to submit the written case studies, but we do submit the aggregated percentage data?
I think in an ideal world, the case studies would be brilliant, and I think we shouldn't dismiss the importance of narrative evidence when we want to kind of demonstrate what our funding can do and how important it is. But yeah, we completely appreciate that there is a lot of burden in the sector, and we completely appreciate that this is a new thing requiring different kind of structures and ways of working in your institution. So if you cannot do the case studies, you cannot do the case studies. That is completely fine. Again, would strongly encourage you to do so, but also then in that feedback survey, please let us know what made it difficult and if there were ways in which we could refine that would enable your institution to provide some of those narrative examples.
But I think if categories are all we can get, we'd say that rather than opting out. Yeah. So yeah, something's better than nothing, certainly.
Definitely.
That's it. So partial submissions, yes, please. And also in terms of narrative examples or case studies, you do not have to write a case study of 2,000 characters in response to every question. This is the maximum limit. If you give us something, a story that is written in 50 words, but it's a powerful story that shows how you use some specific funding that falls under that falls within the category of SURF, that will be equally valuable in the pilot exercise. The next question from Liam received 3 votes and is also about the categories in the template. So Liam asks, some categories overlap, for example, overhead coverage and professional services staff cost. To what extent are we expected to reconcile our responses against actual spend? Or should we describe our budget allocations? We don't want to ask finance colleagues to replicate track.
It's a really good question, and I think has to be answered first by acknowledgement that this is a different way of working. We have not asked you to do this before with this funding, and that in many cases it requires you to set up structures that you don't yet have. That's why this is a pilot, to kind of look at your ability to set those structures up and the level of detail that you can provide on the spend. So I think for this pilot, the more accurate you can be, the better. But again, some data is better than no data. And again, in that feedback opportunity, please let us know what the challenges were, what processes you had to create or refine, and indeed, if suitable, if appropriate, like let us know what the limitations were of the way you have reported it, because that will enable us to better understand how we can gather the best possible evidence in a fuller rollout. I'm not sure if you want to add anything else to that.
No, I think that's helpful and covers it. I think in terms of that, if you feel questions are replicating other data sources, that's also helpful feedback, because it enables us to try and manage that burden on the sector. If you feel that it would completely replicate what you've already provided elsewhere, then we're interested in that.
Thank you so much to colleagues gathered in the conference room for answering questions from our participants today. I can't see any unanswered or open questions at the moment. Perhaps some participants might still be typing or considering things, but if not, we might be able to finish a little bit earlier. I guess I just wanted to emphasize that for any further assistance clarifications with the pilot exercise, we're on the learning journey together, essentially, Research England with you at universities. So please do not hesitate to either email us at researchpolicy@ari.ukri.org, or if you are meeting any of us at any kind of sector events, conferences, visits that we might be undertaking as well, we're happy to chat face-to-face on those occasions, or we'll pass questions to the relevant colleagues if we can't answer them ourselves. I'm going to have one more look at the Q&A box, but no, nothing new came up in here. In which case, Anna, would you like to conclude the webinar, please?
I can do, yes, and I realised because we had some malfunctions in the room, you didn't actually know to introduce yourself even. So Helena.
Hi, my name is Helena Mills, so I'm one of the heads of research funding in Research England.
But no, otherwise, thank you for those that attended. As like I said, we've got 2 further webinars where it will be a very similar presentation. But if we do seem to be, if we feel like we've most of the sector have already attended the first couple, then there'll certainly be more room for questions at that final one. And then we're looking to support you to complete this as best as you can. So thank you very much for your time today.
Thank you so much, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.